The sun is shining, the birds are chirping, the bacon is sizzling. Welcome to the Daily Swole.
Welcome, everyone, to episode 94 of the Daily Mother Swole, live on Busker and Periscope, and filming for YouTube, podcast available on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. So I'll just talk like this for the rest of the episodes. Let's talk about, should you even lift arms? Should you even work your arms, training arms? Can we get away with leaving arms alone? Let's discuss. This has come up because I've talked to a few people that have heard through the grapevine, wherever this grapevine is. I don't think it's organic. They're saying that they're getting experts that are telling them, what's up, Taylor? They're getting experts that are telling them that they don't need to train arms. I don't know what experts these are. It doesn't sound much like an expert to me. But that they don't need to train arms. They don't need to do arm training. So I'm thinking about this. But I want to apply this because there are applications. There is a reason, or there could be some kind of strategy or scientific basis or a training principle. You know, I always talk about, everyone, even myself included, we throw around the word workout. We throw, around the phrase going to the gym. But really, I'm a proponent of training. Knowing what your goal is, knowing what you need to do to accomplish it, and then doing that. If you want to lose weight, you're training specifically to lose weight, doing A, B, and C. If you want to build muscle, then no matter what you like to do, you're doing X, Y, and Z to build muscle. Because if you want four, you got to do a couple things. You got to add 3 plus 1 or 2 plus 2. All right? You do 3 plus 1. You got like a couple options. There's a couple different ways to get 4. Some numbers you can do a lot of different crazy math, but that's, it's convoluted. It's much easier to add 2 plus 2 to get 4 than to take, 10, divide it by 2, and then subtract 1. It doesn't make much sense. You're going around the bush. Sometimes you have to do that to get results, but it's easier to go to a straight line, right? So do you need to do arm training? If you're a beginner, let's get this out of the way. If you're a beginner, if you're a novice, if you're new to fitness, if you're new to training, if you haven't done a lot of exercise, you don't need at the very beginning to start isolating arm exercises. And here's the reason. The muscle fibers are not used to stimulation. The muscle fibers are not used to overload. The muscle fibers are not used to that extra stress and that extra internal force. So that stimulus from the weights, from lifting really heavy and those micro tears and that trauma, your body does not need that when you first start. Doing things like compound movements, doing things like more global movements, like a bench press, like a push-up, for example, uses more joints. Doing something like even chest flies, even things like planks, pull-ups, barbell rows, those general multi-joint movements are more effective as a beginner because you're stimulating more muscles and everything is shocked. So when you're just beginning, when you're just starting out, doing general movements are fine because you're hitting all the muscles and those muscles are having that alarm reaction. They're freaking out already because they're not used to that kind of stress. They're not used to anything. So doing a larger muscle group, for one, is going to be safer. You're not going to do as much overload. You're not going to cause as much damage to an individual muscle as you were if you just started doing bicep curls. I know this personally because when I was 13, literally the first time I ever lifted weights in a friend of mine's basement, his brother and his father had a weight set, and he used to work out with his older brother. I had never touched weights before. So we did a workout in his basement. Yay, good idea, right? When you're 13. 13-year-old being trained by a 13-year-old. This is a recipe for amazing results, right? This is how you make some sick gains. So we had those little weight sets, where like the tiny bar for bench, where like the handles, like the rack is like narrow. Those little things you get from like Dick's Sporting Goods. Those those older mini little workout sets, right? Tiny little thin bench. So I did chest. I did rows. I did like kneeling. I did like overhead standing, tricep extensions, and I did bicep curls. I remember I could not extend my arm for about 3 weeks. I couldn't extend my arm for 3 weeks. It was so traumatically damaged that even when it didn't hurt anymore, it was like locked, and I was really nervous. I didn't tell my parents. I was really nervous, like my arms wouldn't really straighten out, ever. That's what it felt like. After a while, they weren't sore. It just wouldn't move. It was just they're really sore. They're really damaged. They're really banged up from a lot more volume than I ever should have done. And for the first time, this stimulus was the first time ever. First time ever. So that kind of overload, that's what it's like for anyone for the first time training. You don't need to do isolated bicep curls. You don't need to do tricep extensions. Just doing chest would have made my arms and my shoulders and even my biceps sore. You have synergist muscles. You have assisting muscles. So those larger muscle groups like chest, those larger muscle groups like back, like the lats and the trapezius, the rhomboids, those larger groups that utilize multi-joints during exercise like a row, like a bench press where you're using the shoulder and the elbow rather than just isolating the elbow joint, you're dispersing the tension, you're dispersing the force over more joints. It's safer, and those smaller muscles are getting hit plenty. Those smaller muscles are getting hit plenty with the larger macro movements. So if you are someone who does not have a lot of experience in the gym, I'm not saying you never worked out before in your life. You might be out of the gym for a couple months. You might have been not working out for a couple years. Like, I used to work out in college, but I haven't worked out in a long time. It could be, you could be 3 months out of it, 6 months out of it. You might not have worked out for 3 years. Or you may be watching this and thinking, hey, I got to get my butt into the gym. I've never worked out my entire life. Where do I start? You need to start general. Don't isolate anything right off the bat. You need to do maybe some body weight squats. You need to do some general push-ups, get your proper form. You could check out my YouTube channel, youtube.com/Swolenormous, and you can look at some of those basic core exercises. I explained the core plank, the supine hip bridge, the single leg squat, some of these basic movements at home to get your body activated so when you go to the gym, you start hitting the right muscles when you do these larger integrated movements. It's very important that certain muscles of the hips or muscles are firing. You can get into yoga, but start with larger movements. So when it comes back to, should I do arm training? Absolutely. When you're doing bodybuilding, it's always beneficial to isolate muscles. Even swimmers, even these Olympic athletes, they isolate individual muscles, but then they integrate it totally in the body. You don't see these like professional swimmers just doing shoulder raises, but they do weights, but then they use that to help them get stronger and more efficient in the pool. So they might do isolated movements, but then they integrate it together, but they're very advanced. They're the top in the world. For an individual, you still need to overload the arm, the bicep. You still need to overload the deltoid, overload the, let's say, the tricep. The application of that is for more advanced training. The application is for more advanced training is for people that have had a lot of exposure, the muscles have experienced the volume, the overload, to the point where doing isolation exercises would benefit and give the reaction or give the overload those muscles need to stimulate growth. At the beginning, you don't have that need for that much overload. Okay? Take a quick question on Periscope. What protein do I recommend? I recommend food. I am not huge on eating or consuming powdered supplements. Okay? Eat food. Eat whole food. Get yourself some nice, healthy, grass-fed, organic stuff, and pound it. So that's when it comes to that. So if you have any questions, understand, in closing, beginners, larger, more generalized movements, more specific, more advanced, then you can start isolating the arms and then gradually build from there. So think about it this way. If you've never worked out before, let's say you don't do any isolated movements. As you get stronger, your biceps, your triceps, they might need more overload individually, so you spend more time on them. That's why I do an arm day, because I could train arms hard for an hour and maybe get a little bit sore or get I can have a great workout, but my biceps, my arms can handle that kind of volume, that many sets on each individual muscle. If you're just starting out, you don't need that. You will hurt yourself. You will damage the tendons. You will get tendinitis. You can get extremely sore and not be able to move for a week or two. It's going to be really bad. It'll be really bad, so you don't need to do that. Start general, maybe throw in another set or two. And also, if you're just starting out, don't go crazy to failure. Live to see another day. If you're not that crazy sore, if you didn't push it that hard and you realize it the next day or two, that's fine. Start to push harder. Always do a little bit less than too much at the beginning and ease yourself into it, but start with larger multi-joint exercises that use, let's say, like a push-up that use the entire arm that, use the entire back like a row, like a pull-up or an assisted pull-up. Don't go isolated with little tiny exercise. Don't go do like 30 sets of calves. You won't be able to walk for a month or you'll hurt yourself. Okay? I'll stay for a few minutes on Busker and Periscope. Thank you for joining me on YouTube, and I hope everyone can tune in. If you missed part of it, you can also catch it on SoundCloud, iTunes, and Stitcher. My podcasts are great. It's great to be consumed audio. So I'm going to get to that in a second. Will push-ups be good for the core? I'm going to stay for a couple minutes after on both of these live streaming. Thank you so much for joining for episode 94. Tomorrow will be episode 95 of the Dailyswole. Peace the mother out. Enjoy your Monday, especially if you're in the United States, just because it might be another day where you are. Peace out.